Hello and welcome fellow motorsports fans. Well, the F3 title battle is slowly turning into the Freddie Slater versus Ugochukwu duel we've all been hoping for. Between the likes of Taito Kato, Pedro Clerot and Kanato, there have still been more than a few positive surprises so far, and I'm here to tell you all about it, along with a rundown of F2, GB4, the Ginetta Juniors and not one but two major European karting series, so let's not waste any more time. F3 at the Red Bull Ring was the insane spectacle it always is from a spectator perspective, and contrary to Monaco and Barcelona, the team dynamics looked a lot closer to previous seasons this time out. Most notably, of course, Trident having some proper pace, not just for fast Freddie Slater, but Noah Stromstedt as well. Now, I still don't quite know how Stromstedt didn't get a penalty for taking out Slater in the sprint, but at least he did make up for it with a sick drive in the feature to take his first win of the season. And I think we also got the best of Slater in the first half of that race, being both absolutely rapid and showing off his aggressive overtaking skills to take the lead. But I reckon he might have once again taken just a little too much out of his tyres compared to his rivals. At least, it also gave us what felt like the first proper wheel-to-wheel between our big title favourites, as Ugochukwu did wrestle back P2 late in the race. Fantastic scenes and a moment to remember, I think. We might well see lots more of that throughout their careers. A couple of heavy hitters ruined their weekend in qualifying, and most notably Teo Final and Brando Badoea, leaving room for a few others to really shine this time out. First, Ernesto Rivera with his excellent maiden victory in the sprint. A Campos starting on the front row next to a Prema should be a setup for a somewhat easy win these days, and Rivera did convert that opportunity quite comfortably, even if the initial overtaking attempt was a little bit clumsy. And second, Pedro Clerot for me was one of the big stars of the weekend, not just for his podium in the sprint, but also his charge up the top 10 in the feature. It might have not been fully expected before the season, but when watching the former Brazilian F4 champion, I think you can really see the few seasons of extra experience he has gotten under his belt before stepping up to F3. He's looking rather refined compared to some of the more erratic competition. If he can find some consistency in qualifying, which used to be a bit of an issue in the past, then he might well set himself up for a strong finish in the championship. Back to talking about teams, MP Motorsports has looked a little better, but to be honest, still not exactly great this weekend. Qualifying pace was there, race pace not quite so much. Yeah, both Tuka Taponen and Alessandro Giusti could at least fight for points, but still watching Giusti slip out of the top 10 in the feature, while Nikola Tsolov managed to score 2 points, was a little bit depressing in my opinion. And it couldn't come at a worse time for both drivers. I don't know how well they are set up in terms of budget, but their career trajectory very much suggests both were looking for a strong result this year, probably coming into the season with the title on their mind. Instead, even a top 10 finish overall could prove to be difficult. I hope the Ferrari and Williams academies are not going to draw any strong results-based conclusions for the future. ART has low-key been one of the surprises of the season, with their full rookie lineup looking quite strong across the board, even if Maciej Gladish is unfortunately struggling a tiny bit compared to his teammates. Taito Kato has been making the headlines quite a bit, and rightfully so. I knew he was quick, but this season he is also really making a name for himself with his racecraft and ability to bang out some overtakes. But again, we knew about his talent beforehand. Much more surprising is Kanato and his ability to somewhat match Kato more often than not. I always had him down as a bit of a mediocre driver, and not bad by any means, but rarely impressing, especially since graduating from F4. I thought on this level he would find himself a little exposed. Instead, he has really risen to the occasion, and while not yet reflected in the points, he is making sure the ART team lead discussion is not quite as open and shut as it looks on paper. And finally, a shout out for Jin Nakamura. High-tech might still be nowhere to be found, potentially costing Finn McLaughlin his career, knowing how ruthless the Red Bull Junior team tends to operate, but the Toyota-backed star in the making has still managed to string together a great weekend, including his maiden podium and competing with Clerot for best of the rest in the feature. And I have to point out, he has not been as incident prone so far this year as he used to be in frac. If he can actually sort that out long term and maybe find himself with a better squad, I could see him as a title contender next season, even if that is unlikely with the Toyota high-tech partnership. Although, I suppose he might well get the promotion to F2 instead, in which case he could end up being a lot more dangerous than just his placing in the championship here will suggest. In F2, the sprint produced what probably has been the most ridiculous podium I've ever seen, with John Bennett taking a maiden victory ahead of Sebastian Montoya and Rafael Villagomez. And I don't want to take anything away from them, but I honestly am struggling to take that too seriously. Funnily enough, this was Villagomez's first time scoring all year, which was a bit of a surprise to me. He's of course inarguably one of the worst drivers on the grid, but I thought he had still looked better than usually this season. But either way, enough said about the sprint, I reckon. Fortunately, the feature brought us right back to our scheduled program of our epic title battle, with Nikola Tsolov this time having the upper hand on Gabriele Mini to take a dominant win. Considering the rookie status, and I think it is inarguable at this rate that Tsolov will likely leave the season as the most impressive driver, no matter the final standings. And fittingly, rumours are starting that he has already signed with V-Cup, or whatever the fuck they are called at the moment, for next year. We've talked about this earlier in the season. Red Bull was always going to promote him if he has a good season, and I think he's currently doing much better than that. All things considered, I think Rafa Kamara drove a good race, even if he could not go with the leaders, while Alex Dunn dropped off a cliff in the second half to completely take him out of contention. Nevertheless, the star of the show was Olli Goethe, finally taking his first ever podium in the series. That has been a long time coming, hasn't it? The former Red Bull Junior has had quite a few disappointing results so far this season, and with his late season surge in form last year, I had definitely expected more, but we do still know he can drive a car, and the old strategy finally allowed him to get something to show for it. With F1 out of the question, he is one of the drivers I'm really curious to see where his career will take him. Would be kind of fun to have him team up with his brother in a GT3. I'd rather not talk about the utter disappointment Dino Beganovic has been this weekend, beaten by Roman Belinsky every step of the way and not scoring a single point to make any hope of the title an even more distant dream. Honestly, just a bit of a shame all around. Instead, let me shout out Tarsen Pruvazak for what has probably been his best race of the year so far, all things considered, making the most of the old strat to take P5 ahead of the road in Duo. I have been a tiny bit disappointed by the Thai driver so far. You might recall that I believe him to be one of those eternally underrated drivers that just doesn't get any recognition by the general public. Then again, his accident in Montreal probably did not help with his progression while adjusting to the series. ART might not be a front-running squad, but Kushmaini has been showing that you can indeed score good points with them anyway. Hopefully, this wasn't a one-off for Pruvazak, but rather the start of some more consistent appearances in the points. Seeing Max Verstappen fight at the front at what is effectively his second home track at this point was quite a nice sight, but I reckon we can comfortably skip the F1 segment this time around. It is primarily a feeder series show after all. Let's get a couple of the smaller series out of the way instead, starting with GB4's third round of the year, which honestly was a bit of a mess. Lots and lots of safety car intervention across the weekend, in combination with some odd quali performances from our title protagonists, made for a bit of an unreliable weekend all around regarding the results. Alex O'Grady was the only one of our contenders doing reasonably well in quali, and has thus surprisingly taken over the championship lead from Fred Green, despite the latter still looking like the fastest man all around this weekend. At the very least, the title fight is now wide open between Green, O'Grady and Enzo Hallman, so we've got something to look forward to. The true drivers of the weekend were Luke Hilton and Dayton Coulthard, both with consistent runs in the podium positions, and thus now ahead of somewhat struggling Thomas Ingram Hill in the standings, though I need to see more of that before I'd consider one of them a proper title contender. We gotta give a shout out for Yasser Iskander, not just for scoring his first top 10 finish, but because the two DNFs mean the results don't reflect his performance. Guy was quick all weekend long, and while he certainly has some work to do on the racecraft front, it was still nice to see some of the more promising rookies perform. And in the Ginetta Juniors, it was business as usual for our 6 former British karting stars that are controlling this surprisingly tight championship battle. Lewis Goff might still have a decent lead, but just on performance alone, I wouldn't count any of those 6 out for the time being. Still 4 rounds to go after all. The biggest developments of the weekend were probably Jacob Ashcroft and Riley Cranham, both finally getting their maiden victory, with Cranham looking particularly excellent throughout the weekend. Probably the man to beat this time out. But honestly, I don't have much more in-depth to say about this series at the moment. Really, this is just one to enjoy for the fireworks and to remember the names that'll go on to do great things in the future. That might have been it for the car racing action, but we had both the IAME Euro Series and the ROTAX Euro Trophy, so let's talk about that in our quick weekly karting report. Let's start in Genk with the ROTAX Euro Trophy, where in the juniors, Danny Babicek may have suffered some minor mechanical issues halfway through the race that potentially cost him the win, but a podium was still more than enough to extend his championship lead over Raris Pascoe and Martin Soltis, both of which didn't manage to stay with the lead group this time around. More importantly though, we got a sick win for guest starter Finlay Lines ahead of former rival Albi Friends in an all-too-fitting duel. Hopefully you know these two by now, but if not, take note. And in the seniors, the final was all about Jeremy Rivas and Freddie Lloyd, with Lloyd taking the victory to ever so slightly close the points gap to his Spanish rival. Unfortunately, my personal favourite and reigning ROTAX World Champion Macaulay Bishop is still suffering from his DSQ he got himself in the first round, meaning even with a convincing podium here, he needs more than a bit of drama further up the road to have a shot at the title. Realistically, it is probably Rivas to lose with the form he has been having, but of course a single DNF can change that story quite quickly. The IAME Euro Series was over in Wackersdorf at what is effectively my home track, where in the juniors, the day was all about guest starter Daniel Miron Lorente coming in hot to take a perfect weekend ahead of Theo Policant. Crucially, the title battle itself remains quite wide open, with Max Andercott and Ivan Gonzalez almost equal in points, and Policant also still having a good chance. I still need to highlight the female representation of the grid, with this year's girl breakout driver Sukmani Kera, who once again brought home a top 10 finish, and somehow it was far and away her worst weekend so far this year. That just goes to show how good she has been, and at least mathematically, she's still in the title hunt as well, even if that would require nothing short of a couple of miracles really. And in the seniors, the story of the weekend can only be one thing: the heartbreaking mechanical DNF for Dan Alleman, retiring while fighting for the win and thus substantially reducing his odds of winning the championship, now quite a bit behind defending champ Aaron Garcia and veteran Danny Caronini. But once again, I do have to highlight the female prospects as well, and here Roxanne Lantinga has put in a great drive, going toe-to-toe with Garcia for a photo finish and running P6 all day long. And in a field as experienced and competitive as this, that is definitely something to keep note of. She has made giant steps forward since I'd say about the second half of last year and is seemingly still on an upwards trajectory. Fingers crossed someone gives it a shot at F1 Academy soon. Next week, we'll conclude the shifter portion of the European Karting Championship, so do look forward to that, along with all sorts of feeder series action with F1, 2 and 3, and F1 Academy at Silverstone, as well as the entire top Formula Regional level series spread across the Hungaroring and Imola, so lots to look forward to. Fair warning in advance, there is so much going on, I reckon we might skip the road to Indy next week, but do feel free to tell me what you think I should prioritize. But until then, it is now your time to leave all of your opinions and predictions down in the comments, so we've got a little something to discuss. A special thanks goes out to our channel members, Freaky Lawyer, Vic Herman and Halland, and otherwise, I thank you all for watching and I do hope to catch you in the next one.